Throughout history, human ingenuity has been applied to create both wondrous and terrifying inventions. This video will explore some of the most frightening and cruel devices ever conceived, serving as a reminder of the darker aspects of human nature and the importance of learning from our past mistakes. Number 1. Judas Cradle. The Judas Cradle, also known as the Judas Chair, was a torture device used during the Middle Ages. It consisted of a pyramid-shaped seat, often made of wood or metal, with a sharp point at the top. The victim would be lowered onto the device, with the point inserted into their anus or vagina, and then left to slowly sink onto the point under their own weight. As the victim's body was forced down onto the point, it would gradually cause severe pain, injury, and sometimes death. The device was designed to prolong the suffering of the victim, as the sharp point would gradually tear and damage internal organs over an extended period. The Judas Cradle was often used as a form of capital punishment, or as a means of extracting confessions during the Spanish Inquisition. It was also used in other parts of Europe, such as Germany and Italy, during the same period. This torture device serves as a grim reminder of the cruelty and brutality that humans are capable of inflicting upon one another, and the importance of standing against such acts of violence and inhumanity. Number 2. Mousetrap Pistol. The mousetrap pistol, patented in 1882 by James A. Williams, was a device that combined a conventional mousetrap with a loaded pistol. The invention was designed to automatically fire the gun when a mouse triggered the trap, killing the rodent. While the intention behind the invention may have been to efficiently deal with pest problems, the mousetrap pistol posed significant risks to anyone in the vicinity of the device. An unsuspecting person could easily stumble upon the trap and accidentally trigger the gun, resulting in injury or death. Moreover, the device raised ethical concerns about the use of lethal force against animals, even in the context of pest control. The invention represented a level of overkill that many would consider inhumane and unnecessarily cruel. The mousetrap pistol is an example of how seemingly innovative solutions can have unintended and dangerous consequences. It highlights the need for careful consideration of the potential risks and ethical implications of any new invention, no matter how well-intentioned. Number 3. Blood-powered lamp. In 2007, designer Mike Thompson created a controversial invention called the blood-powered lamp. The device was designed to use the chemical reaction between human blood and luminol, a substance that glows when it comes into contact with the iron in hemoglobin, to produce light. To operate the lamp, the user would need to break the glass, cut themselves, and allow their blood to drip onto the luminol solution. The reaction would then generate an eerie blue-green glow, lasting for a short period before the light faded. The blood-powered lamp was intended as a provocative art piece meant to challenge our perceptions of energy consumption and the lengths we might go to in order to power our devices. However, the invention raised serious ethical and safety concerns, as it required users to harm themselves in order to generate light. Number 4. Pair of Anguish. The Pair of Anguish, also known as the Pair of Anguish, was a cruel and painful torture device used during the Middle Ages. The device consisted of a metal, pear-shaped object that was inserted into the victim's mouth, anus, or vagina. Once in place, the device would be slowly expanded using a screw mechanism, causing intense pain and internal damage as it stretched and tore the victim's orifices. The Pair of Anguish was often used to extract confessions, punish prisoners, or as a form of execution. The device came in various sizes, with the largest being reserved for the most severe punishments. The psychological terror inflicted by the Pair of Anguish was often as severe as the physical pain, with victims living in constant fear of the device being used on them. Number 5. Scold's Bridle. The Scold's Bridle, also known as the Branks, was a cruel and humiliating punishment device used primarily on women during the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe and the American colonies. The device consisted of an iron muzzle or cage that was fitted over the head, with a metal bit or spike that was inserted into the mouth, pressing down on the tongue. The scold's bridle was used to punish women who were accused of gossiping, nagging, or speaking out against authority figures. The device prevented the wearer from speaking and often caused pain and discomfort, as the metal bit would cut into the mouth and tongue. In addition to the physical pain, the scold's bridle was designed to publicly humiliate the wearer. Women who were subjected to this punishment were often paraded through the streets, serving as a warning to others who might consider engaging in similar behavior. Number 6. Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden, also known as the Virgin of Nuremberg, was a torture device that originated in the Middle Ages. It consisted of a human-sized hinged iron cabinet with a front opening, typically adorned with the figure of the Virgin Mary on the outside. The interior of the Iron Maiden was lined with sharp spikes or blades positioned to pierce the victim's body when the doors were closed. The spikes were often strategically placed to puncture vital organs, causing a slow and agonizing death. Victims were forced inside the Iron Maiden, and the doors were shut, leaving them to suffer as the spikes penetrated their flesh. The device was designed to prolong the victim's suffering, as the spikes would not necessarily cause immediate death, but rather a gradual, excruciating demise. The Iron Maiden was used as a method of torture and execution, often reserved for the most serious crimes or for individuals who refused to confess or provide information under interrogation. The device's association with the Virgin Mary added a twisted religious symbolism to the torture, further compounding the psychological anguish of the victims. Number 7. Spike Collar. The spike collar, also known as the heretic's collar or the neck violin, was a gruesome torture device used during the Spanish Inquisition and throughout medieval Europe. The device consisted of a metal collar, typically made of iron with sharp spikes or blades pointing inward. The collar was placed around the victim's neck and locked in place, with the spikes pressing against the throat and head. Any movement of the head or neck would cause the spikes to puncture the skin, resulting in severe pain and injury. Victims were often forced to wear the spike collar for extended periods, causing constant agony and preventing them from sleeping or finding any relief. The device was designed to break the victim's will and force confessions, or extract information through sheer torment. The psychological impact of the spike collar was as severe as the physical pain it inflicted. Victims lived in constant fear, knowing that even the slightest movement could result in further injury and suffering. Number 8. The rack. The rack, also known as the ladder, was a torture device widely used during the Middle Ages and the Spanish Inquisition. It consisted of a rectangular wooden frame with a roller at each end, to which the victim's wrists and ankles were attached. The victim would be stretched out on the rack, their limbs tied to the rollers. The torturer would then turn the rollers, gradually increasing the tension and stretching the victim's body. This process would cause excruciating pain as the limbs were pulled from their sockets and the muscles and ligaments were torn. The rack was designed to inflict maximum suffering on the victim, with the ability to control the intensity and duration of the torture. It was often used to extract confessions, gather information, or punish those accused of crimes against the state or church. The psychological impact of the rack was as severe as the physical pain it inflicted. Victims would often confess to crimes they did not commit or provide false information to stop the torture, leading to wrongful convictions and further injustices. Number 9. Dimple Machine, 1936. In 1936, Isabella Gilbert of Rochester, New York, invented a bizarre contraption called the dimple machine. The device was designed to create artificial dimples on the cheeks, which were considered a desirable facial feature at the time. The dimple machine consisted of 2 knobs that were pressed against the cheeks, with straps that wrapped around the head to hold the device in place. The user would wear the machine for extended periods, hoping to create permanent indentations in their cheeks. The device was marketed as a beauty tool, promising to enhance one's appearance and attractiveness. However, the dimple machine was not only ineffective but also posed potential health risks, such as facial muscle strain and skin irritation. The invention of the dimple machine highlights society's preoccupation with physical appearance and the lengths people will go to conform to arbitrary beauty standards. It is a testament to the misguided and potentially harmful nature of some beauty trends throughout history. Number 10. Electric smile. The electric smile, invented in Japan in 2011, was a controversial device designed to force a smile onto the face of the wearer. The invention was marketed as a tool to help children develop positive facial expressions and improve their social interactions. The device consisted of a pair of electrode pads that were attached to the corners of the mouth. When activated, the electrodes would deliver a mild electric current, causing the facial muscles to contract and force the wearer's mouth into a smile. The electric smile raised serious ethical concerns about the use of physical manipulation to control emotional expression. Critics argued that the device could have negative psychological effects on children, teaching them to associate smiling with discomfort and coercion. Moreover, the invention promoted a superficial understanding of happiness and social interaction, suggesting that a forced smile was sufficient to improve one's relationships and well-being. Number 11. Heretic's fork. The heretic's fork, also known as the witch's bridle, was a brutal torture device used during the Spanish Inquisition and throughout medieval Europe. The device consisted of a metal rod with two opposed bi-pronged forks attached to a belt or collar. The victim's neck would be encircled by the belt, with one fork pressing beneath the chin and the other against the sternum. The prongs of the forks were sharpened, causing intense pain and preventing the victim from speaking or swallowing. The heretic's fork was often used to punish those accused of heresy, witchcraft, or blasphemy. Victims were forced to wear the device for extended periods, sometimes while being paraded through the streets as a form of public humiliation. The constant pressure and pain inflicted by the heretic's fork would cause the victim to experience extreme discomfort, fatigue, and even asphyxiation. The device was designed to break the victim's spirit and force confessions or recantations. Number 12. Strappado. The strappado, also known as the corda, was a brutal torture method used in medieval Europe and during the Spanish Inquisition. The technique involved tying the victim's hands behind their back and suspending them by their wrists from a raised beam or hook. The victim's arms would be wrenched behind their back, causing extreme pain and often resulting in the dislocation of the shoulders. The torturer could also add weights to the victim's feet or ankles to increase the pressure and pain. Victims of the strappado would experience excruciating pain, not only from the dislocation of their joints, but also from the prolonged suspension, which could cause respiratory distress and circulation problems. The torture could last for hours or even days, leaving the victim with permanent injuries and psychological trauma. The strappado was often used to extract confessions, gather information, or punish those accused of crimes against the state or church. It was a popular method of torture due to its simplicity and effectiveness in breaking the victim's will. Number 13. Spanish donkey. The Spanish donkey, also known as the wooden horse, was a torture device used during the Spanish Inquisition and in other parts of Europe. The device consisted of a sharp, triangular-shaped wooden board mounted on legs or a sawhorse-like frame. The victim would be seated astride the device, with the sharp edge of the board pressing against their genitals, perineum, and anus. Weights would then be attached to the victim's feet or ankles, causing them to slide down the board and increasing the pressure and pain on their sensitive areas. As the victim slid further down the board, the sharp edge would cut into their flesh, causing severe lacerations, hemorrhaging, and potentially fatal injuries. The torture could be prolonged by adjusting the weights or the angle of the board. The Spanish donkey was often used as a method of punishment, humiliation, and interrogation. It was particularly effective in causing intense pain and psychological anguish, as the victim's own body weight was used against them. Number 14. Tucker telephone. The Tucker telephone, named after its inventor Dr. A.E. Tucker, was a torture device used in American prisons during the early 20th century. The device was essentially a modified field telephone that delivered electric shocks to the prisoner's body. Prison guards would attach one electrode to the prisoner's toe or genitals, and the other to another part of their body, such as their tongue or fingers. The telephone's hand crank would then be turned, sending a powerful electric current through the prisoner's body. The intensity and duration of the shocks could be controlled by the guards, allowing them to inflict varying degrees of pain and suffering on the prisoner. The Tucker telephone was often used as a means of punishment, interrogation, or to maintain control over unruly inmates. The use of the Tucker telephone was a clear violation of prisoners' rights and a form of cruel and unusual punishment. It highlights the abuse of power and the inhumane treatment that has plagued the penal system throughout history. Number 15. Coffin torture. Coffin torture, also known as the iron coffin or the cage, was a cruel and inhumane method of punishment and execution used in various parts of Europe during the Middle Ages. The victim would be forced into a metal cage or coffin, typically made of iron, that was just slightly larger than their body. The cage would then be suspended from a tree or a gallows, leaving the victim exposed to the elements. They would be left to suffer from hunger, thirst, and exposure, often for days or even weeks, until they succumbed to death. In some cases, the cage would be designed with spikes or blades on the interior, adding to the victim's torment. The confined space and the inability to move would cause severe physical and psychological anguish as the victim awaited their slow and painful demise. Coffin torture was often used as a public spectacle, serving as a warning to others and a demonstration of the authorities' power. It was a particularly cruel and prolonged form of execution, designed to inflict maximum suffering on the condemned. Number 16. Lead sprinkler. The lead sprinkler, also known as the lead shower or the drip of death, was a gruesome torture method used in medieval Europe. The device consisted of a container filled with molten lead, which was positioned above the victim's body. The molten lead would be slowly dripped or sprinkled onto the victim's skin, causing severe burns and unimaginable agony. The intense heat of the lead would cause the skin to melt and the flesh to cook, leading to excruciatingly painful wounds and, eventually, death. The lead sprinkler was often used as a form of execution, reserved for those accused of particularly heinous crimes or for individuals who had angered those in power. It was a slow and terrifying way to die, as the victim would feel every drop of the searing hot metal on their body. This torture method is a disturbing example of the inventive cruelty employed throughout history to inflict suffering and maintain control through fear. It is a reminder of the dark depths of human imagination when it comes to devising ways to harm others. Number 17. Chastity belts. Chastity belts, although their historical accuracy is debated, were supposedly devices designed to prevent sexual intercourse and masturbation. These belts were typically made of metal and were worn by women, encircling the waist and covering the genital area. The belts would have a locking mechanism, often requiring a key, which was held by the woman's husband or father. This allowed them to control the woman's sexual activity and ensure her fidelity, particularly during times when men were away, such as during the Crusades. The use of chastity belts was not only physically uncomfortable, but also a deeply misogynistic practice that treated women as property and denied them bodily autonomy. The belts were a manifestation of the patriarchal society's desire to control women's sexuality and maintain male dominance. In reality, the existence and widespread use of chastity belts during the Middle Ages is questionable, as there is little reliable historical evidence to support the claims. However, the concept of the chastity belt has endured as a symbol of the oppression and control of women's bodies throughout history. The idea of the chastity belt serves as a reminder of the long and ongoing struggle for women's rights and the importance of promoting gender equality and bodily autonomy for all individuals, regardless of their sex or gender. Number 18. Breaking wheel. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel or the Wheel of Fortune, was a brutal method of execution and torture used in medieval Europe. The device consisted of a large wooden wheel with radial spokes, upon which the victim would be tied. The condemned person would be stretched out across the wheel, with their limbs tied to the spokes. The executioner would then use an iron bar or hammer to strike the victim's limbs, shattering the bones and causing immense pain and suffering. The process of breaking the victim's bones could be prolonged, with the executioner delivering multiple blows to each limb before moving on to the next. In some cases, the victim would be left to die slowly on the wheel, their broken body exposed to the elements and the public. The breaking wheel was often used as a form of capital punishment, reserved for those convicted of serious crimes such as murder, treason, or heresy. It was a public spectacle, meant to serve as a deterrent and a demonstration of the authorities' power. Number 19. Saw torture. Saw torture, also known as death by sawing, was a gruesome method of execution and torture used in various parts of the world, particularly during the Middle Ages. The victim would be hung upside down, often with their legs spread apart, and a large saw would be used to cut them in half, starting at the groin and progressing through the torso. The process of sawing through the victim's body was an agonizingly slow and painful ordeal. The inverted position would cause blood to rush to the victim's head, prolonging their consciousness and intensifying their suffering. As the saw cut through the bones, organs, and flesh, the victim would experience unimaginable pain until they finally succumbed to death. Saw torture was sometimes used as a form of public execution, meant to serve as a warning to others and a display of the authorities' power. It was also employed as a method of punishment and interrogation, with the threat of this horrific fate used to extract confessions or information. Number 20. Garrote. The garrote, also known as the garrote vil, was a method of execution commonly used in Spain and its colonies from the early 19th century until its abolition in the 1970s. The device consisted of a metal collar attached to a post or chair, with a screw mechanism that could be tightened to strangle or break the neck of the condemned. The victim would be seated in the chair with the metal collar around their neck. The executioner would then turn the screw, tightening the collar and applying pressure to the neck. Depending on the severity of the crime and the desired level of suffering, the process could be quick, causing immediate death, or prolonged, resulting in a slow and agonizing strangulation. The garrote was often used as a method of capital punishment, particularly for political prisoners and those convicted of serious crimes. It was considered a more humane alternative to other methods of execution, such as hanging or firing squad, as it was believed to cause a quicker and less painful death.